Hey, so I'm just in Pereira, Colombia right now, and here's the park that I'm in. Not actually sure the name. I think you can see, yeah, you can see the mountains are in the background here, right? I like that. So in this video, I wanted to talk about or give you a general introduction on traveling in developing countries. Of course, I know that a decent number of the people watching this video are actually from developing countries, so it won't necessarily be useful information for you, but it might still be interesting to know, to be able to understand it in contrast, I guess, and see it from my perspective. The other point I want to make is that there's huge varieties of different kinds of developing countries. So there's varieties in income level. Like you have countries like Colombia that are barely even developing, right? And then, let me figure out which way to go here. Yeah, I'll go this way. There's countries like Colombia that are barely even developing countries, or Thailand on the high end. And then you might have countries more like India or Ethiopia or even Uganda on the other end of the spectrum. And then there's just general cultural variety. There's whether or not you speak the local language is going to affect your experience quite a bit as a traveler. So I'm just going to go through some of the things that things that maybe aren't normally mentioned, that are pretty broad across developing countries, not every single one. But the first thing is that usually things are louder. So in Western countries, as a Canadian, I've noticed this also having spent quite a bit of time in Germany. People are obsessed with things being quiet. If you make too much noise, people will complain, especially when you're in higher budget accommodation. But what you'll notice in developing countries, especially say Guatemala as an example, or Nicaragua is another example, you'll notice that people can be really, really loud. And it's not disrespectful, it's just, like for example, I remember in Guatemala, on Lago Atitlan, and I think in some other areas as well, people would regularly set off fireworks at 3 in the morning, but it wasn't even it wasn't teenagers, or it wasn't rebellious teenagers. It was just, regular people were just setting off fireworks at 3 in the morning, or they'll play music at 5 in the morning when they wake up, like loud dance music at 5 in the morning. And I remember the loud dance music at 5 in the morning as well in Tuk Tuk village on Danau Toba in Indonesia. So that's the first one. Second one is that life, generally speaking, moves much more slowly. So another thing that we're kind of obsessed with in the West, in general, especially in North America, but just in general in Western countries, is getting things done quickly and having services happen really fast. And that's kind of a good thing, right? I mean, there's pros and cons of that, and that's a whole discussion to get into. But sometimes you'll ask someone to do something for you in a lot of developing countries, and it'll take them 15 minutes to even get started. And I'm really not exaggerating. Like, you'll say, would you something you need this person to do for you, whether it's some kind of bureaucratic customs thing or maybe some food that you're asking for. I remember one time in Malindi, Kenya, I think I waited 3 hours for lunch one time. And that's another thing, is while you're waiting, no one's gonna say anything. No one's gonna say like, oh, today we have to go purchase the, I ordered matumbo, and maybe that takes a long time to prepare, I'm not sure. But I ordered the matumbo in Malindi, Kenya, and it took them 3 hours, but nobody came up to me and said, it's kind of dark here, the shadows. It'll be done in a second. No one came up to me and said something like, oh, it's gonna be a long wait, do you wanna order something else maybe? I just sat there for 3 hours waiting for my matumbo. I don't think they were being intentionally disrespectful or anything. I think they just didn't really, they don't put the same emphasis on time. That's another one, is people will be late. They don't put the same emphasis on things being, you know, on sort of like trying to maximize every minute of your day, which is not better or worse, it's just a different approach to life, right? In the West, I feel like, and I have this mentality 100%, despite having spent so long in tropical developing countries, I still have this mentality like, I want to optimize every 5 minutes, right? I don't like spending 5 minutes and feeling like I wasted 5 minutes even. But if you're in the Swahili coast of Kenya, they don't really care about wasting 3 hours. No one really even thinks about it, right? I mean, 3 hours is pretty extreme. That was definitely one of the more extreme times. I would say that sometimes maybe people will make you wait, you know, an hour, 20 minutes, and it doesn't really feel necessary. It feels like, so you ask, could I have my food? Okay, and then everyone just sits there for 30 minutes. And you're just waiting, and you're waiting, and then you realize that was them revving the engine up to get started working, right? And like I said, especially in North America, but Western countries in general, how long does it take you to get started working? Like when you're at your job and you have a task to do, boom, it's like, you know, 1/10 of a second and you're just at it, right? I don't even think twice. I'm ready to go. I'm on fire constantly. Maybe that's not a good way to live your life. Maybe it is. I don't know. I don't have an opinion on that yet. Another thing to keep in mind are the toilets. So if you're staying in a nice hotel, you're at a nice restaurant, they will, nowadays I've noticed, when I first started traveling about 4 years ago, it was a little bit different. Or maybe I just stayed in cheaper places. But I've noticed that over the past 4 years, it seems to be more and more common that places have the normal Western toilet with Western, I don't know if it's Western plumbing, with modern plumbing. That is what I've noticed, that it seems like more and more places have that standard approach. But when I first started traveling, maybe it's just because I was staying in lower budget accommodation. One second. Oh, that guy seems super sketchy. Just because I was staying in lower budget accommodation, a lot of the places were like squatty potties, you know, and even if they had a regular toilet, you definitely couldn't put your toilet paper in there, right? You throw it in a little bin. It might seem kind of gross, but if you throw it in the proper toilet, it'll plug the plumbing system, right? So there's actually quite a few more things that I discuss in an article, which is my introduction to developing countries, and that's part of my beginner traveler's handbook, which is a series of blog posts that I've written. Ideally, I'll have an associated video for every single blog post, but that's a process. Some of the videos are a little bit more difficult to make than others. But anyways, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And check out the blog post that I mentioned. It will be in the description to the video.